Thanks for having me. My name is Ed. I'm alcoholic.
Yeah.
So I don't know many people in this room, so I'll just give you a little brief background, share what it was like, what happened, how it is now. So as Rob alluded to, I grew up in Boston. I was the youngest of 6 Irish Catholic kids, considerably younger than my older brothers and sisters, 10, 9, 8, 7, 6 years older than me. My earliest memories are my father being shit-faced drunk and starting arguments in the household. And, my siblings, older siblings, most of them anyway, they like to go out and party, and they'd come home and I'd see them in, various states of insobriety and hangover and that type of stuff. And, some of them were studious and some of them were skipping school and focused on athletics. We were all over the board, but it was chaos. And, my first job started when I was 11 years old. I was caddying, of course, where my brothers caddied and they played, and where my father played and he drank. And all the guys he played with drank, and all the guys I caddied for, they drank. Blue collar club, and that's what those guys did. And I thought they were men, I wanted to be like them. But I got drunk for the first time when I was 11. By the time I was 15 in 10th grade, playing for the high school basketball team, I was getting drunk every weekend. By the time I was 18, pretty much drinking every day. The time I was 20, I was drinking every morning. And, I was always just looking for that straight line, that sort of good buzz that would take me through the day. Very maintenance drinker, almost from the first time I started drinking. First time I started drinking was at a picnic from my mother's company. Me and one of the owner's kids stole a 6-pack of beer. We went out in the woods. We drank it. We got drunk. I drank 4 of them. He drank 2. And we got caught, surprisingly, at 11 years old, drunk at a company picnic. And I remember when we got caught, I was in trouble. And people were really fucking angry. We can't believe that, this kid stole this beer and has made an ass of himself. And I remember thinking, even when people were talking to us, I was like, I'm going to do this again. Because I found it. Because I never felt a part of. I always felt inferior. I was a small kid. And, I didn't have a whole lot of confidence in anything that was going on. And it felt great. And every opportunity I got from that point forward to drink, I took it. And I was never one of those people like, hey, let's go out and have a beer or two. There was never a beer or two. I was always trying to have more than a dozen because that's the way I like to drink. And, that's how it was. And, the old saying of I didn't get in trouble every time I drank, but every time I got in trouble, I was drunk. Well, that for sure shit was me. I drove drunk a lot. I wrecked cars. I got arrested for breaking and entering. I got arrested for, they call it, something having to do with getting in a fight. I cheated on girlfriends. I stole money. I stole, food from stores. I just was out and, creating chaos. Somewhere along there, the state of Massachusetts then said, hey, you're 21. You can legally drink. And it was awesome. And I loved it. I loved getting drunk. I loved going out partying. I loved the way it made me feel. It wasn't until I was 40 years old that I ever went on a professional interview sober. I was a sort of a middling student at best. I was on the 6-year program at a commuter school largely, working full-time for my brother's landscaping company. And my whole goal was just to have enough money to get drunk. And working for my brother had a lot of benefits. Had a lot of downside too, because he was an angry Irish guy. And his anger was largely directed at his sibling. But he always bought beer at the end of the day to apologize. Never an apology, but always a 12-pack. And for me, that was a great deal. And, the only reason I was in school at all was just to tell my mother that I was, hey, I'm in school. But I didn't have designs on anything. I didn't have thoughts about where my life would go. I was working most days or plowing snow and getting drunk. Plowing snow while drunk, which is not a good idea. Had a lot of accidents plowing snow drunk. But, that's how it went. And, I graduated college when I was 24 and, life was off to a raging start. I didn't know what I was going to do. And just recently, I actually asked one of my sisters, I was like, hey, you remember I graduated college? She's like, yeah. I was like, what do you guys think I was going to do? She's like, oh, we just hoped you weren't going to go to jail. I was like, really? I was like, I'm the smartest of all you fucking guys. She's like, yeah, that's just the way we felt about it. And I was like, all right, well, And, I got lucky enough. I got a job that led to another job that led to an opportunity to move me out to Seattle. I'm the only person in my family who's moved more than 12 miles from the house I grew up in. My sister still lives in the house I grew up in, which is 1,200 square feet of World War II asbestos-sided claptrap that's fallen in on her. But she's not moving, and she loves it in Lexington, and you go from there. Um, but I moved out here, and it was great because I got away from all the prying eyes of family, and I was never really all that concerned about it. But I got away from the chaos and the infighting in the family, and to cut to the end, we all get along now. Everyone's very supportive of each other. But when we were younger, there were some really difficult moments. People would be either drunk or just angry about something from growing up in the household we grew up in, and someone would throw an insult, and things got pretty testy. And, it wasn't always kind. And I moved out here, and, the same deal. Had a job. It was great. Kept drinking on the way to the office every single day. Working on the east side. I moved to West Seattle in 2000. And, I would venture to guess that of all the people who have crossed the 90 bridge, I've had as much beer on that bridge as just about anybody. I sat in a lot of traffic jams. It was my favorite time of the day. After work with a six-pack on the 90 bridge, sitting in traffic, listening to music. No one to bother me, no one to accuse me of not being where I was supposed to be. And I just drank. But when you live that way, and like I said, I drank through work. Never drank over anything. I hear a lot of people say, I drank over this, I drank over that. I never drank over anything. I just drank. I drank when I was happy, when I was sad, when I was celebrating, when I was commiserating. Didn't matter. I just was drinking. I was looking for that flat line. And, I had a lot of good times. But again, when you live that way, eventually you tell lies, just like the first time I was drinking, we lied, we stole, and we cheated. And eventually all that catches up to you. And I had two young kids, and I got caught in my lies and cheats and, dishonesty. And I got thrown out of my house, and I was couch surfing, sleeping on a leather love seat at my office, sleeping in buddies' apartments. And I called my brother and said, hey, I think I need some help. He'd had some spotted sobriety over time. And he came out and figured out how to get me into a rehab up in Monroe at Valley General Hospital, which was, when I mean it was no frills, it was no frills. I was like, well, what the fuck? I always see these things for like Malibu. And I'm up across from, the Monroe racetrack and dressed like this. And they're all started calling me Bellevue Ed. And I was like, Bellevue Ed? What the fuck? I live in Seattle. And they didn't know the difference. So, I was up there, and rehab's hard. You see a lot of differences. There's a lot of heroin addicts, a lot of opiate addicts. And when I first got there, all I could see was the differences. And I'm like, what am I doing here? This is ridiculous. I shouldn't be here. And, as I was fighting it and wrestling it, there was, they had a speaker come in almost every day and was talking. And there was I'll never forget, a 55-year-old female Korean nurse who'd never had a drink in her life. She used to steal pills from the hospital she worked at. And I remember sitting there thinking, like, what the fuck am I doing here? Why am I listening to this lady prattle on about a bunch of bullshit? And there was a Q&A after, and someone said, sounds like you're doing okay. You had a pretty good job. You're working in an ER room. Why'd you stop? She said, I just looked down and I realized I was in a hole and I had to stop digging. And for whatever reason, I looked around and said, fuck, I'm in rehab. And all these people in rehab, and we're here for the same goddamn reason. And it was just what I needed to hear when I needed to hear it. And that first year sobriety, thank God I haven't never managed to relapse, but that first year sobriety was literally the year of most emotional and spiritual growth I've ever had in my life. I was gung-ho. I was doing it. The next second year out, I made the most money I'd ever made in my life. Life was going great. And then, as I found a repeated pattern in my sobriety, I let it get to my head. And I never stopped going to meetings. I never stopped, doing some of the things I'm supposed to do. But it's just little things, little dishonesties. I'm supposed to be here, but I don't want to be there, so I'll say this. And, before I knew it, I was miserable again. And I got to dig down into the steps again, and life got better. So there's always a spot in here, from the spiritual experience, because I certainly did not have a white push moment. Like I said, my background was Irish Catholic, so I rejected all of that shit. and the God thing was really hard for me. Spiritual experience, it talks about the educational variety, which is what I had. I didn't have a burning bush moment. I didn't have a white light. It was slowly but surely over time that it happened. But I always come back to this, which is we find no need to have difficulty with the spirituality of the program. Willingness, honesty, and open-mindedness are the essentials of recovery, but they are indispensable. Then there's a quote here from Herbert Spencer, which in true alcoholic fashion is noted that it's not really his quote. It's from my sponsor. There's a principle which is a bar against all information, which is proof against all arguments, and which cannot fail to keep a man in everlasting ignorance. That principle is contempt prior to investigation. And like I said, I haven't always done this program perfectly, but when I'm in trouble, when I get down, the first thing that goes for me is willingness. And, over the last few years, as Rob indicated, I have had some really difficult times regarding a divorce and some situations with my children, and I've felt really put upon. And the one thing I credit this program for, and I think my sponsor would testify to it, I haven't made it worse. And there's been plenty of opportunities to make it a lot worse. But as my first sponsor said, you know what, Ed? Why don't you shut the fuck up? Not everyone needs to hear what you're saying when you're thinking it. And that's the type of sponsorship I needed. I didn't need restraint of pen and tongue. I needed direct communication. I needed, this is what you should be doing. Because I didn't get that when I was growing up. But I found that when I'm willing, when I'm open, and when I'm honest, my life gets better. And when I'm not, in sobriety, without drinking, my character defects return. And, they say it's a daily reprieve contingent upon our spiritual condition. And I find that to be more than drinking. I find that to also be with my own behavior. Because I hear a lot of, slightly newcomers or people who are beginning to work the steps like, all these character defects have been, removed from me. And I'm like, just wait. They're coming back. They didn't go anywhere. You're just keeping them at bay with good behavior. Because I'll tell you, from that 11-year-old kid, I don't know why, but I like lying, and I like cheating, and I like stealing. And left to my own devices, I'd do a shitload of it. From taking the pack of gum at the airport to, hey, I dated that girl. Like, just stupid shit. That doesn't mean anything to anybody. But like I said, when I'm willing, my life gets better. And when I'm not willing, my life gets worse. And, Rob asked me to come in place of another guy. I didn't want to. But again, willing. I was grateful enough. My girlfriend had a school auction. Rob actually got me out of it. Which is fucking awesome because I hate school auctions. There I don't know anybody and got to go to those. But, I get to show up and do this thing. So when I was in rehab, I always closed almost all of my shares with this. There was a guy who was there who was this old redneck fucking truck mechanic, and I hated him. And he'd come to that goddamn Valley General Rehab Center every day, and he got called on virtually every day and talking this monotone. And I was always trying to fuck with him and always trying to make fun of him and always trying to, just get his goat. And, he would just kind of look at me, blank stare, and then walk away. And he used to always end his shares with the same thing. It's like, look, alcoholics, we all think we're so smart, but you got to be really stupid to get this program. It's like, look, you can go through 164 pages. You can do whatever you want. He goes, but 5 things. He's like, don't drink, go to meetings, don't drink in between, get a sponsor, do what he or she tells you to do, and get rid of your drunken slug friends. And you know what? By and large, that's a recipe that works. Do what your sponsor says. Go to meetings, share as best you can, try to be open, honest, and willing, and life gets better. So that's all I have. So without further ado, I think I'm supposed to bring Rob. Yep. No.